So good evening. We appreciate those of you who are able to come out tonight, and we are going to record this evening's presentation so that we can put it on the website as we move forward. Just a couple orders of just business, basically. It's always important when I stand in front of community members to first and foremost thank them. We have tremendous kids in this school district, and they come from tremendous families. And our educators, we all feel extremely just humbled by the opportunity to do this work in this school district. And tonight's presentation on the bond is a lot of hard work that's gone over many, many months and even years to get us to today's point. Brandy and I will present tonight, and our purpose is really just to present facts. It is not our role as school district employees or contracted employees to stand in front of you to tell you how to vote. I just encourage everyone to vote. We have a neighboring school district down in Pierce County in this most recent election, and passage rates to pass a bond in the state of Washington, and they passed it at 63%, but they didn't meet the voter turnout threshold. And because of that, their bond fails. And so it's important that no matter what your opinion is about the bond, that everyone votes and exercises that right. And so we're here to say vote, and we're here to provide the information so that you can make the best decisions possible as community members. Before I get started any further, being the superintendent is a tremendous honor in this school district. Because of all of you, but I also get to work with amazing people. And I want to introduce you to Brandy Fox and have her just talk a little bit about herself. Brandy is our owner's representative, is a fancy title for, she runs our capital projects, and she represents us with our partners who are on the construction side, our architects, and so many others, and does amazing work. But I hope she shares, she's humble, but I hope she shares that it's been a legacy that she's had in this school district. And this one in particular, even here at Island Park, was one of her first projects, clear back in the mid-90s. But why don't you talk a little bit about your history in our district?
Thanks, Dr. Rundle. My name is, my name is Brandy Fox. I have worked as the district's capital projects manager since 1995. I came in right at the tail end of Island Park, Lake Ridge, and West Mercer being remodeled, and the high school was my first project for the district. Since that time, I did the addition to the middle school in 2000, did all the work of the 2014 bond, and so building Northwood and doing the first half of IMS and all of the additions at the high school. And then in between all of that, any project the district has done that requires permitting or bidding of any kind, generally I take on with the facilities department. So I know these buildings really well, and I'm excited to see the district get to the point that we can finish the middle school and do some really needed improvements at the high school.
So we'll go ahead and get started here with our presentation, and we really begin our presentation with a quote that we had pulled, and really anchoring ourselves in that this is a really thought out plan, that this isn't just a hope, this isn't just a maybe, that we know that this community wants plans that are solidified, that people can see, they can understand, and pretty much all but touch, because it hasn't been built. And so what we've tried to put forward is thinking about our students and thinking about our community and really what's going to serve them best. And so all of it went through and then went to our school board, who ultimately made the final decision to put it before the voters. And we're going to talk about those partnerships tonight. So if we take a look back to those bonds in the mid-90s, I think we always have to learn from the past in order to better understand the present. And so we had a number of learning opportunities in the early 90s, and the first one came in 1990 when we tried to pass a very large bond, and it would have done a lot of replacing of facilities, not renovations necessarily, and we received an overwhelming no. to that bond vote in 1990. The district regrouped and came back, and then that's what you see with those series of 3 bonds. And those smaller bonds then, those were the ones that renovated Island Park, Lake Ridge, West Mercer, the middle school, and our high school. And so the conditions of facilities like this here, we're at Island Park tonight, or the middle school, those were the upgrades from the original builds, which were in the late 50s and 60s. So fast forward to more recently, we went back out in 2012 and we were looking at another massive bond. It would have been a $200 million bond in 2012. It would have rebuilt the 3 elementary schools, it would have rebuilt the middle school, and done some additions to the high school. At that time, the community gave us feedback in 2 ways. One is, we don't want super large elementaries. At that point, West Mercer was pushing 700. Lake Ridge was around 630, 640, and Island Park was almost 600. And the community said, number one, that's too big of a number for us. The bond package was too much. And 2, it really didn't solve the issue of what the elementary schools and wanting smaller elementaries. So the district, again, regrouped, went back and came forward with a smaller bond, and that one was just under $100 million. The bond in 2014, which was successful, rebuilt half of the middle school, and that's what you see today, creating the 3 campuses. It built Northwood Elementary, and then it put 12 classrooms on the east side of the high school. So what did we learn from that? When you go out for a massive bond in this community and you don't have a really well laid out plan, we have voters who are very smart, very educated, and really want to make sure that the dollars that they're putting into their schools are ones that are going to be reflective of the community. So, kind of moving forward then into the long-range facility planning process. Before COVID, before I was superintendent, the board and had tasked then Superintendent Koloski with coming up with a long-range facility plan, which really hadn't been done since the last bond had been completed. And so a process started there. It stopped in the middle because of COVID, and then when I was hired, the board's one of their priorities was, please go out and complete the long-range facility plan, bring it back to us so we can start thinking about the long-term future of our schools. So I'm going to turn it over to Brandy because she's been part of that since the very beginning and instrumental in the entire process.
So following the work of the 2014 bond, which was constructed in 2015 and 16, we all grasped for air in 17 and 18. We picked up the long-range facilities plan again in 2019. Did a good amount of work with a large community group of about 30 people. Our final meeting was on March 20th, which was not a good date for a final meeting for facilities. And so that really went back on hold for a couple of years, and it wasn't until 2022, when Dr. Rundle was hired, that we really started talking again about how to approach this. So in end of 2022, the board had us engage 2 demographers to really look hard at demographics and what might have changed since the 2019 work had been done. And then in 2023, we reconvened a facilities planning committee. Consisted of a lot of the same people who were on the 2019 committee, along with some new folks. And that group spent countless hours learning about the condition of the facilities, how the buildings were addressing the learning environment for students, and came up with some recommendations. One was, given the demographic projections, we should think about the elementary question again. Dr. Rundle will talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Number 1 recommendation was finish the middle school. We never intended for this to sit as 3 separate buildings on campus. We really want to see that finished. And then really need to look at 30-year-old facilities at the high school and how those are limiting learning and affecting the environment there. So with that information, we did some community outreach. I think we did 7 different community events. Got some very pointed feedback in those. Went back to the committee and reformed a recommendation to the board. That recommendation was finish the middle school, do these select improvements at the high school, determine if there are any really must-do projects. So in early '24, we moved into what we called the concept design phase. Next slide. I'll turn it over to you and then I'll talk about it.
One of the questions that we certainly see, particularly families who may have been here since the 90s or even when we were talking about building new elementary schools, is why isn't an elementary school included? And one of the things that we factored into that was, as Brandy mentioned, listening to the community really valued the 4 community schools. And one of the things that's challenging us right now is certainly our demographics. And are our demographics going to continue to change, not in terms of who, but how many students are enrolling in our schools? But more importantly, as we started thinking about if we start doing enhancements to the elementary school, which elementary school would it be? And really that's going to take a lot more study, because if we're talking about something like Island Park or Lake Ridge, we have to ask ourselves, can we even build while students are on campus, or are we going to have to move students away from their school, put them in the other schools, and then bring them back? And the challenge with that is if you're a 4th or 5th grader and you're being disrupted in 4th and 5th grade, and then you go to the middle school and the middle school is being built, there could be 3 and 4 years where you're impacted as a student. And so taking into consideration the community feedback that 4 schools is really preferred, knowing that we need to do a lot more planning and thoughtfulness on that, we really made the decision that the investments in the elementary schools really needed to be in the capital facilities. And so we replaced a boiler in each of the 3 elementary schools this year, put in carpet this summer. All 3 elementary schools will get interior, exterior paint, and we'll continue to make sure that these are vibrant and fantastic learning environments. They may not be brand new builds, but we're going to invest the right money to make sure that they meet the needs of our students and staff.
Great. So with that kind of clear direction that the projects we were going to work on for concept design was finish the middle school, the high school, and these other must-do improvements, we started with the middle school. And that process was really interesting. We reached out to the entire student body on a number of occasions. We created 2 different committees at the school, a steering committee that had students and staff and parents and administrators on it, and really worked to figure out, we had an EdSpic from when we built the first phase, but what was different? How had things worked for the first phase? Were the classrooms that we thought we needed then the same thing that we needed now? How many did we need? STEM has really grown at the middle school level. And so we have more STEM classrooms planned than we might have done in 2014. We tried to design a very compact building. One of the things we heard over and over at the middle school was how important it was to bring that community back together. That being so separated with such distance, you have teachers in the 200 wing that will never see anybody in the new building for a month at a time. And students who are on a dead run to get from one class to another class in that building. So you can go to the next slide. Oops, go one more and then we'll come back to this one. The design of this school is very compact, brings everybody back under one roof, creates a secure outdoor courtyard where kids can circulate within the building without having to be supervised, and really extends the building. Another thing we heard is we don't want this to feel like phase 1 and phase 2. We want it to feel like the middle school when you're done. We want it to feel like one continuous building. So back one slide, Dr. Rundle. So we designed this very basic project and did a lot of comparables with other school districts to ensure that our square footage per student and our cost per square foot were really within the realm of what we should expect. At the same time, there were other things that were also important. We had a lot of requests for some sort of a performing arts, multi-purpose facility at the middle school that could provide a performance venue, for drama and for ensembles and for small musical groups. But also, we needed a large space where we could have all staff meetings, and there was a lot of desire to have a community space that was separate enough that it could be rented to community groups for performances and art and other things. So that's included. And then we had a lot of discussion around sustainability. A lot of conversation around HVAC systems and cooling. So in the project, we're including cooling for both the Phase 1 classrooms as well as the Phase 2 classrooms. We're using a hybrid mass timber structure that really reduces carbon. We're also, as you may know, we have 99.9 kilowatt hours of solar power on the Phase 1 building. So Phase 2 will be all solar ready so that we can leverage any grant opportunities to install solar on that building when the time comes. And then some really creative stormwater management techniques in the courtyard that provide great teaching opportunities for kids, as well as a really low maintenance solution for the building. So that's an architectural rendering of what that looks like. One thing that's probably worth noting is that, I wish I could get up there and touch this and show it to you. Do you have a pointer on there? Yeah. Okay. So the current 100 and 200 building run east-west, kind of on the north portion of that site, with the 300 building sitting just to the south. This solution allows us to tear down the 100 building, build a wall at that corridor, and then house all the kids in the 200 building and the 300 building during construction. There was another thing we really needed to figure out with the city of Mercer Island and the architects is whether we could do this project without having to create a sea of portables someplace to temporarily house kids. So a really creative solution that accomplishes a lot of good things for that site. High school was a completely different project. Deborah's still here. I'm just going to say the board gave us this what felt to me like an impossible task, which is go out and identify all the need at the high school and then somehow get all those people together and prioritize what's most important for this bond and then make sure everybody can get behind it. And it took us a number of meetings, again, with a really comprehensive steering committee, but we managed to do that. And the result is that the recommendation is to modernize the 2 and 300 hall, along with the courtyard that sits between those two wings. That's the radio station and broadcast and robotics and a lot of those non-science STEM programs, the TEM programs. In addition, that courtyard will really give us an opportunity for the library to be able to spill outside, gives another secure courtyard for kids to be able to pass through. In addition, we looked at Crest holistically with this. So there are 2 components at Crest that are included in this project. One is to create a secure vestibule as an entry, similar to what we've done at all of the other schools. And then their health room is currently a closet. And so we're going to make some modifications to that. This also includes some renovation of the stadium restrooms, as well as acoustic and lighting improvements in the front of house for the Performing Arts Center, acoustic treatment in the commons, and some architectural treatment to try and size that down a little bit and make it a little bit more of an intimate space. And then in the gymnasium, gymnasium works great for athletics, but what it doesn't work real well for is showcase and so many of the other events that happen there. So this would be paint and lighting and acoustics in the gym. We have new bleachers, our gym floor is great, but it's really just that treatment for acoustics. The last part is locker rooms. Those locker rooms and training rooms were designed 30 years ago. They're not very functional at this point. And so renovating both of those spaces to create team spaces and break them down a little bit for use.
You want to do the must-use?
Yeah. Yeah, the other component, we mentioned the board said, come back and tell us about the any must-do components. And one of the things that really came to light at the high school, in every group that we talked with, the number one thing we heard there was the mechanical system in this building has reached the end of its life. We have rooms that are 60 degrees and rooms that are 80 degrees. And so this plan replaces all of the thermostats and controls throughout the building, replaces some really key pieces of equipment, as well as rebuilds all of the air handlers up in the attic. It's not a full mechanical system replacement, but it's a really good first step to getting the building balanced again and functioning as it should. It's also getting increasingly hard to buy parts to maintain that system. I think we've bought every component off of eBay that we can. They don't make them anymore. The other part of that is, again, a 30-year-old fire alarm system, so it doesn't have the voice component to it that a current code-compliant system would. It meets code now, but if we're going to do any work at the high school, we really need to take a full approach to the fire alarm replacement there. The other must-do project that we identified is the administration building and the accessibility issues between the two levels. So this small project includes adding an external elevator to the building that will give us that ADA accessibility between the floors. And then it also reconfigures the parking around the admin building and Crest so that we can have direct ADA access. Right now, if you want to get to the boardroom, the ADA parking is up towards the peak, and then you have to come down in front of Crest and down a long ramp and in, which nobody does. They just pull into the lot and say, wow, I can't get in there. So some solutions there, as well as that very awkward area between admin and Crest that is a very steep parking lot. So that'll come out, and we'll put rain gardens in and some ADA trails through there. Also has the added benefit of being able to extend the horticulture program out into that rain garden area. Did I miss anything?
So one of the things that we've been very honest and upfront about is that, unlike in sometimes when you run bond measures where you're stacking one bond and then it ends and then you continue, you're just keeping tax rates flat, or you're not raising taxes. And that's not the case with this particular bond. And I want to make sure that everyone knows that this is a tax increase. And I want to talk a little bit about how we got to where we are with the numbers and what that looks like. So if we start here, this is kind of our big all-in-one graphic. And if we kind of then chunk it into pieces and we take a look at the first one, across the top on that blue bar, that really gives you a sense of the projects that Brandy just walked us through. The two that we didn't cover so far that I'm going to touch on right now come at the right side. And one is the concept design. All of the work that's gone into getting us to where we are now. A piece of this bond would reimburse our cap tech levy, which has been the primary driver for that. And the other one is the elementary study that I did talk a little bit about that gets into making sure that we really set the next group up for success, the next boards and community members as they consider the future. If we then zero in a little bit further and go to that next slide, we can take a look now a little bit more at the financials. And so if we take a look there at the total cost of the projects, the numbers on the top are if we were to build this last year. Had we built this last year, you can see that the middle school project would have been around $72 million. We know that we didn't build it last year, and we won't be building it for several years, or a couple years anyway, if the bond passes. And so we have an escalation factor there, and that gets us to all the way down the blue there. When you add that all up, that's how we got to $165 million. A couple pieces of information related to that, because now it goes into, wow, $165 million is a big number, and how does that impact the individual taxpayer? So a few different ways to look at that. The $165 million bond package would increase our tax rate by 45 cents per thousand. So if we start digging into that a little bit more, the tax rate for all of the school district project, or all the school district funding on the island right now, levies and bonds, that equals $1.44 per thousand. If we pass this bond, that's going to go up to $1.89 per thousand, and that's how we get this 45-cent increase per thousand for our school district. What that equates to on $1 million home is about $450. And if we double that to what more of the average home is, obviously we get closer to that $1,000 figure, and we're going to dive into that a little bit further. So the last piece, one more, Brandy? The last piece that we wanted to share, just in terms of how we might look at this, is for every dollar that I invest in this, where does that dollar go? And half of that dollar is going to go into that middle school project. Another 10% is going to go into the enhancements to that middle school project. That's that performing arts center. That's some of the sustainability features that we heard were really important and that our board really thought we should push forward. 22% then goes into our high school project. 12% then goes into those must-do HVAC and fire sprinklers. Another 3% into those accessibility issues that we have in and around some of our facilities, with the final 2% in that design process and thinking the future about the elementaries. So another way to look at it is, on $1 million home, that's about $38 a month. Or, how does this compare to the past? Because as I said in that very first slide that I talked about, we need to learn from the past, and we know that the community was not interested in a $200 million bond. They wanted something that was more reasonable. So that's where we came to that $98.8 million bond. If you fast forward to today and put that in today's dollars, it's about $170 million. And so the board and the community who were part of the long-range facility planning process were really clear that, yes, we can do a lot of things, but we should keep this bond package something that's more commensurate with what we were able to pass in 2014. So that's how we kind of came to that budget number. This, I'm going to show two graphs in a row. They're going to look very similar, but the key difference is this first one is if we didn't do anything, if we did not pass a bond at all, what would happen to taxes? So I direct your attention starting from the bottom up. The gray bars at the bottom, that's our enrichment program and operation levy. That's a 4-year levy that will be coming due next February. It's been one that we've passed successfully and had in our district for a number of years, as you can see going back. And that's a key levy that pays for our programs and our operations for the district. If you go up one to the yellow bars, that's our capital technology levy. That's the levy that we use, that we're investing in our schools, like our elementary schools. We're investing in technology, and so that also has been one we've had for a number of years. The next one up on those blue, the blue sections of those of the graph, that's our debt service. That's the current bond that we have right now. So in 2014, when we passed that, that particular bond, we sold it in 2 chunks. We did not sell it all at once. So as we sold it in 2 chunks, and they were each 15-year bonds, you fast forward to 2029 and 2030. From 2014 and 2015 up to 2029 and 2030, that's when we'll be done paying off that, in our words, in our personal lives, would be a mortgage. For our school district, those are our bonds. So if we did nothing, we would see that the tax rate would continue. We'd kind of hit $1.54, and then it would drop off because we would not have any more debt as a school district. So we'll take a look now at what does it look like going forward if we do pass the bond. And this illustrates where there is that tax increase. And again, you come across, you can see that in 2024 right now, we're $1.44. And then you can see that if we start selling those bonds in 2026 or 2025, 2026, we'll start incurring that debt, and that's where you see that increase to $1.89. That's where we're getting that increase of 45 cents. You'll see that we tried to flatten the tax rate. So if this passes, we stacked the new bond on top of the existing bond, and so that over the course, we'll pay off both debts at the same time without bouncing tax rates. So the key is to try not to create unpredictability for the taxpayer and to try to smooth that out. It's never quite that smooth because rates change or values of homes start to change, as well as levies and things change slightly. But the idea is the increase is supposed to be something over time. If we take a look at our next slide, this one helps us to see, and click one more. This helps us to see of an average home on Mercer Island. So an average home on Mercer Island right there in that 2026 area is about 2.3 million. And so the annual property tax, is about 2.2 million in 2024. If we were to start selling bonds, you can see we start to see that step up in 2026 of $1,282. That's that increase of that 45 cents per thousand. And then there's small increases over time because we anticipate that your home values will continue to appreciate and go up. And so you can see that that first step up is where we see the biggest jump. Now keep in mind, if this passes, we will not sell all $165 million at once. We'll sell it over probably 2, maybe 3 different sales, which means that the taxes don't go up all at once. It could be over a couple of years, but this gives you an idea. This is a look, it's just another look at where we kind of compare in the region with our tax rate. And so this is showing us here in King County, all of the different school districts. You start there with the bonds and what are districts asking their voters right now of what they're paying for bonds. Then you can see that enrichment program and operations levy, followed by that cap tech levy, and then finally for the total value. So right now we're at that $1.44 is our current rate, and that puts us down just below Seattle and above Skykomish. I also want to be very clear that I also know that home values being what they are on Mercer Island, that doesn't mean your taxes are cheap. You still have certainly high taxes, but the rate compared to other school districts in the region is quite low. A question we get sometimes is, why does Seattle not have bonds at all? And just a quick piece on that, if you take a look at the total assessed value for Seattle at nearly $300 million, they can pass a cap tech levy and collect enough money on their cap tech to fund building new schools and to do their projects. And so that's why they're the outlier there with why they are able to build schools or remodel without passing bonds. So lastly, when might we consider another bond? That's really a decision for a future school board, a future decision-making process. If this one were to pass, we would certainly be thinking about the future. That's why we're building in the elementary school studies. But when we would do that would really be another community conversation. We know that there is definitely a threshold that taxpayers feel like that is worth the investment in the schools, yet still makes sense to them as individuals. So that has not been contemplated yet. That would be something that would be down the road. That's not part of the current study. So with that, we just kind of close with that final quote again. Hopefully our community has seen that from community members to the students who are involved, our school board, our educators, our administrators, our close contracted personnel who are just like our normal faculty here. It's been a lot of thought that's gone into it. And I just want to thank all of those people who have been involved and all of our community who continue to support our schools in so many different ways. And appreciate everyone being here tonight.